Here we go.
You folks to meet the actors who portray Travis and Mike in the film. The other man, I'm sure you'll recognize right off, is perhaps best known for his hole-in-the-head role opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. He's the cop who won't die, but melts and gets split apart, everything else. But he's here and he's in one piece. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome D.B. Sweeney and Robert Patrick. I think they like it.
This is Sergeant Reynolds from Criminal Investigations calling Lieutenant Frank Waters. Are you there, Lieutenant? Over.
Because it is true. Truth is more stranger than fiction, as they say. And this is a good, solid script. And I like the boys. The boys are good. Of course, it's their picture, and I'm just going to support them. But I like it.
To really relate to Travis and Mike, you and DB had to learn how to be loggers and...
Yeah, we were with the chainsaws out there logging, and I actually nearly took out a bunch of crew guys. I was supposed to aim it at the camera this way, and the lights and everything were here, crew guys were here. This is a huge tree, and I had it going, and I thought I had it aimed the right way. Next thing I know, it's going towards all these guys, and they're all running, they're screaming out.
The whole energy of the cast came together pretty quickly. The first or second day we were in the room together, you could sort of look around, and, oh, there's Craig Sheffer, yeah, he's Dallas, and Robert Patrick was already well into his thing. And it fell together very nicely.
Hey, bud.
We said we do a little fishing when the contract's over.
When this contract's over, yeah?
Come on, it's what we need, one of our camping trips. Some hunting, some fishing, chasing bears.
Oh, yeah, I remember. You ran that bear up that tree.
Just trying to make friends.
How come you can't make friends with Dallas?
He's just jealous I can do something he can't.
I know, what's that?
Reading, right?
Oh, I just play a sheriff who is a real character, Sheriff Waters, and he doesn't believe a word they say. He just doesn't believe in UFOs, and also he's never had a case he didn't solve, and it really gets to him because he's going to have one he can't solve, and it really bothers him. He doesn't believe a word about any UFOs.
You expect me to believe that a flying saucer came down and took your friend away to outer space?
That's the truth, mister. That's exactly what happened.
Is it? Is it?
And you know that, Blake. Why the heck aren't you speaking up for us? Why let this man talk to us like this?
David, I will.
It seems like you're not even trying to believe us. We all saw the thing. We all saw the guy get zapped.
How about you, Mr. Dallas? You go along with that?
Oh, yeah, I go along with that.
You don't sound too sure.
Well, I'm sure.
Why don't you fellas tell Lieutenant Waters what you saw? Or what you think you saw?
It was Dallas that saw it first.
What about it? Tell us about it. What'd you see? What did it look like?
It looked like a fire.
Stop, Mike! Stop the truck! Travis! Travis! You son of a bitch! The hell you doing? Get back in the truck, asshole!
Travis, whatever were you thinking about, boy?
Well, you'd have to know me back then.
What, a hellraiser?
Well, I can explain what he did. About three months before this happened, we had another little experience. He jumped out of the truck to chase a bear that ran across the road. And if you can explain that, you can explain this.
I'm not like that anymore. It's just,
They're saying get back in the truck, and that was just kind of egging me on. Now, I was scared too, but...
Hey, Mike! Travis, get out of there! How's that? You feel that? Travis! Travis! Get the hell out of here! Get back in there! Travis! Hell is that? Stay down! Everybody stay down!
It's an incredible experience playing these guys, I'll tell you.
Some of these loggers came back.
Mm-hmm.
One did not. You did not.
I played
Your
Travis
character.
Walton.
Right.
I see the UFO, I get out of the truck, and just after what we just saw, I get zapped by a bolt of light, and I'm knocked unconscious. The other guys think I'm dead, and they take off. And then Mike realizes I've left my best friend there. I got to go back. And he comes back about 5 minutes later, and I'm gone without a trace.
The other loggers did not know what had happened to
No,
Travis, right?
actually, we're all in the truck just going home from a work day, and we see it. We all see it. He wants to get a closer look and walks out underneath it. So the other guys that are with us in the crew cab, they all see it as well.
Yeah.
So we have like 6 witnesses.
Right.
And then as DB said, I go back with the guys and we look for him. He's gone.
And in real life, this group went back and reported him missing,
Yeah.
maybe even dead.
Yeah. We knew he was missing. We thought he was dead. We thought he was dead. And we went back to the town and we explained to him what had happened. We knew that it was, it's a wild story, but we're sharing it with them, and they didn't want to hear it.
We've been telling you the truth since the beginning. And now we're ready to prove it. We'll take your damn lie detector test. You set it up. We'll be there. You go ahead. And if any of you got anything to say about me or my crew, you say it now. And you say it to my face.
Are you saying, Bill, that all 7 of these people are lying? I'm afraid we have to say that on the basis of physical evidence. Meaning? Physical evidence that should have been there, but was not. Now, you heard Travis and Mike Rogers claim that this beam from the UFO was like a grenade exploding fire flame, that Travis was knocked 10 feet back, and in his book he claims he hit his shoulder against the rock. When the morning after this incident allegedly occurred, when the law enforcement officers went to the site to inspect, they found all kinds of dry pine needles, which, if this had actually happened, those needles would have been blasted away, they would have caught fire, they would have burned.
Why are you laughing, Travis? Well, because this is typical of the sort of reasoning pattern this man uses in attacking all UFO cases. He's equating the absence of evidence to be the evidence of absence. That's absurd, and that's actually a logical fallacy. It's necessary for people to know just exactly what Philip Klass really is, who he really is. is nothing more than a disinformation specialist from Washington, D.C.
What's the word?
The results of one of the tests was unusual. It's inconclusive. We'll have to try again tomorrow.
What about the other ones? What's the word on them?
The process is still ongoing. We never discuss the results until all the testing is complete.
Sorry, fellas. Come back down here in the morning, 9 o'clock sharp.
No.
What?
I said no. Look, we did what we said we'd do. We came in here like guinea pigs and let you test us, but that's it. We've had enough.
I ain't coming back again.
You're saying that you're no longer willing to cooperate?
That's all we do is cooperate. All we get back from you is grief.
Mike, we need a little bit of time.
No, Mike, I'm sick of this shit. You want to press charges? You go ahead. You do it now. We told you everything we know, and if that's not good enough, that's too damn bad, because that's all there is. Let's get the hell out of here.
What are you saying, son?
Hell, Blake, my charts don't lie. If you ask me, those boys are telling the truth.
I think we can be rather certain that this incident occurred, that they're not lying. What they claim happened did happen. It's not a hoax.
The fact that I have to make the audience believe this extraordinary thing has actually happened to me, and if I can do that, it'll be a great victory for me, because it's not a matter of getting them to believe that your dog died or that your car won't start or that you broke up with your girlfriend. It's asking them to believe something quite extraordinary, of biblical proportions. And that was what initially got my attention when I read the script, that central challenge of making, we're not making a special effects supernatural movie, we're making a movie about ordinary people where something extremely extraordinary happens.
Robert, what about you? Are you a UFO believer, generally?
Well, if I can believe I'm a Terminator, I think I can believe this. I've had the theory, I think that Carl Sagan said it best, that we have to at least, we can't be that arrogant not to consider that there could be something else out there. So I came into it like that. And then after I met Mike and Travis and talked to them at length about what they had experienced, I totally believe their story.
You do?
Totally.
So you believe that there are creatures out there who are far advanced technologically over us and even come and visit time to time?
I believe that these guys went through a very traumatic experience. I believe what they've told me. And as I said, going into the movie, I've always had the idea that it is a small universe. And we are a tiny speck. So we have to at least be open-minded enough to consider the probability.
All those good-looking actors and then me. Isn't Gardner a legend? That's him. Man, I'll tell you, every now and then in life you get an honor to, I've been in this game a long, long time now, as you probably might know, and I've been blessed to know all the people you might wonder about. But I'll finish just a quick thing before I bring the man on, is that in 1985, I was on a show with our next speaker, and I had not met him, and he was off the radar for a long time by then. And we were on a home box office thing, you might not, I don't know if it exists anymore, called UFOs, What's Going On? And I said, I told my first wife at that time, I said, I've got to call this guy. And back then there was information you called on the telephone with a cord attached, kids, and a dial. And I got this guy, and I called Snowflake, Arizona, and I found Travis. And that was indeed the day he turned his phone back on to hide from people like me. And I got on, and I think his wife at the time passed me to him, and he says, yeah. And I go, listen, man, I was just on this home box office show with you, and I go, I really respect you. And you know, I'm kind of like you were then. I'm going through all that crap now with Phil Klass, you know, that nefarious person you saw going pine needles. And I said, can you give me any advice? And he said, are you married? And I said, yes. And he goes, okay. He goes, well, get out of it, because you won't be married if you stay in it. I didn't listen twice. Ladies and gentlemen, a true icon in the world, and way beyond this subject, there's a stand-up human being who is just my hero for a billion human reasons. My love to Mike, when you see him. See, there's a lot of pain in this, just like the Bentwaters boys, just different kind of rig, right? It's my honor to invite Travis Walton on stage, and thank you all for being here, and give him a big...
Wow, what an experience, you know, living through that, the experience itself, the reaction that came afterwards, you know, the pressure from law enforcement, all of that. Yesterday we talked so much about, you know, things that happened around the periphery of this. It seemed a little focused on the negative a little bit, but, you know, there was a lot of good in there, you know, that doesn't get enough attention, you know. The support of my family and friends, and the people who knew me most were the people who were the most supportive, and the people who attacked the most were the people who knew so little about it, it was absurd. But I'll get to some of the good side. I want to get right into, you know, what happened that day. It was just an ordinary work day, you know, putting in some long days. We were doing fuel reduction that day, so, you know, I was on a saw, and several of the others, and some of them were piling up what we cut up. And the logging crew themselves, the ones who, the timber crew, the ones who had taken the logs for timber the previous year, had piled some of their material in the clearings, as the contract requires. But a lot of people are surprised that there's even forest in Arizona. They have a picture of the desert, because some of the most famous things, Arizona Highways magazine, you know, pretty much emphasizes the cactus and the desert beauty. But, you know, the largest ponderosa pine forest in the world extends clear from north of Flagstaff there, clear into New Mexico, the Sitgreaves, Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. And unfortunately, since this happened, we've had 2 major forest fires that about 500,000 acres each, and some bark beetle infestations that took about that much more additional timber out because of the drought. You know, when there's a drought, the tree is weakened and is more susceptible to the infestation of these, you know, bugs that live in the forest all the time. But, so, you know, our job was to clean it up and spruce it up and reduce the fire danger. So we all lived in Snowflake. We'd drive out to Heber and then another 15 miles through the forest up to the contract, which was right on the edge of the Mogollon Rim, which is the highest point for many miles around there. The next high area would be clear over there by Flagstaff, the highest point in the state of Arizona. But in the movie, it gave the impression that we'd been driving for some time and were kind of drowsy when we first caught sight of the glimmers of light coming through the trees. But actually, we had not gone that far. We had just, nobody was drowsy, everybody was in an alert state of mind, and the suggestion that we might have had a beer after work or something like that. You cannot drink and run a chainsaw, or you're going to get seriously injured. It is a very dangerous tool. One of the most dangerous occupations statistically in the whole in the United States is forestry work. Highest number of deaths is in logging injury. there's the crew. Mike, crew boss in the upper left. Ken, he was choir boy. They renamed him in the movie. Alan Dallas, the black sheep, is no longer with us. Lower left, Dwayne Smith. Didn't know him too well. He'd only been on the crew for 3 days. He's no longer with us. But I did interview him just very shortly before he passed away, and I tape recorded the interview, fortunately, and to the very end, he was adamant about what we'd been through. John Gillette there, he relates his experience in the aftermath. You know, it came to mind when I was seeing the talk about the men in black, that he would come out of his house and see those guys sitting in the car watching the house. And then Steve Pierce, youngest guy on the crew, he was only 17. He actually, you know, lied to Mike to get hired. You know, he was kind of underage, but he was a big, strong kid and good worker. But he was the one that the debunkers focused in on, figuring that since he was the most traumatized by the event, that he might be the first one to break. But then, you know, the polygraph examiner had that opinion too, you know, that he picked him to be tested first. But, so Steve Pierce was the one that was picked as somebody who might take the bribe. You would think he would try it with Alan Dallas, who was kind of, had a little run-ins with the law in the past, but Alan was totally defensive of what we experienced his whole life. There was the crew truck, you know, that's how 7 of us could ride in the same vehicle. You know, we'd throw our chainsaws and gas cans in the back, and so we loaded up, and we were driving out of there, and we hadn't gone very far, like I said, you know, still wide awake, everybody chattering away, and all these different conversations. Mike and Kenny and I were in the front because we don't smoke, and the guys in the back could sit back there and smoke and keep the windows down and, you know, not choke us out. So when the first thing I saw was just a little glimmer of light, and nobody said, "Hey, look over there," or anything like that. There was no excitement. It was just like, what the heck's that? You know, it was deer hunting season, so I had been hearing some shots in the distance during the day. So I thought, well, maybe there's somebody camped up there, or maybe there's a vehicle on the incline with a headlight shining up into the trees. But the longer I looked, more, you know, what that wasn't adding up. And apparently, you know, the other crew members one by one were noticing this glow, because they quit their little conversation and started looking before anybody said anything. So what could that be? And then, you know, I was thinking, well, maybe it's just the sunset. And no, the sunset went down a long time ago. Could it be, you know, deer hunters camped there? And then, you know, John said he was thinking, could it be the moon? And then he looks over in the other direction, there's the moon over there. So I thought plane crash. But there was one morning that we were driving to work, and it was a clear morning, but during the night they'd had a rainstorm, and there'd been a lightning strike, hit a tree, and it was burning up high, and we stopped and put the fire out. You know, we'd fought forest fire a number of times because, you know, having, you know, the tools and the woods experience, when they'd have a forest fire, the Forest Service would come and get us and hire us to help fight it. So I'd fought forest fire a number of times, and so that's where the name of the movie came from. Fire in the Sky, as we're looking up, and could that be a forest fire? But we hadn't had any rainstorm. It was the wrong time of year for that. During the month of July, late August, is what we call our monsoon season. And that's when we get the most rain, and also when we get the most lightning strikes. The Mogollon Rim area there has the highest number of lightning strikes of any place in the continental United States, except for the Everglades. And most of that, you know, just hits the water out there. But so you're walking along the rim and you see trees, and you know, you're likely to see the big blast in the bark where it's just blown the bark out when that electricity comes down the tree. So that was one of the things that occurred, and boom, there it was. I could see up ahead, there was a glow and walking across the road. And I said, Mike, hurry up, get up there so we can see, because I knew there was an opening there. And as soon as we came into that clearing, there it was, unmistakable. You know, our famous UFO skeptic there saying it was the planet Jupiter, you know. First thing they do is just look up all in the astronomy charts, you know, what might be in the sky, and they try to explain every UFO as being Venus or Jupiter or something. But, you know, this was less than 100 feet away, up from here to the door there, you know, and totally unmistakable. Alan Dallas yelled out, "It's a flying saucer," right off the bat. I mean, there was no doubt. Mike, when I said, stop the truck, Mike, he was hitting the brakes, but he hadn't even seen it yet. He just, you know, I was telling him to stop, so he did. But, you know, that little episode that he was talking about with the bear was kind of what was, you know, had been just a week or so before, is what I was thinking when I threw open the door. I was thinking that this thing would take off and be gone before I got that close. And so I jumped out and I headed there, and immediately the other guys in the crew were becoming alarmed. "Hey, what are you doing?" You know, and then it grew real fast, you know, into full-fledged panic, and pretty soon they were, just like in the movie, they were swearing at me and, you know, screaming at me to get back in the truck, because it was a pretty frightening situation. But I was, I hate to admit, showing off a little bit, but at the same time it was a curiosity. I just thought I'd like to see it closer. It's going to be gone before I get that close. And but the closer I got, the slower I got. I was thinking, ooh, what did I do here? You know. When I got up to where I was looking up about this angle, looking up at the bottom of it, it was just the most incredible experience. The sound it was making was a very complex sound, really high and low, off the range of human hearing on both ends of the scale, but a sound that you could sort of feel in your body at the same time you can hear it, you know, or instead of hearing it. And some of the guys in the truck said it felt like something was about to happen. And I don't, you know, they said they could feel the vibration in the truck, but I think it was more than that. I think there was a charge, an electrical situation, you know. The hair raising on the back of my neck was more than just fear. I mean, my heart was pounding. I was scared. I didn't want to show it, but, you know, by that time, everybody was pretty terrified. Dwayne Smith, and he said that big tough Alan Dallas was crouching down and peering up over the windowsill. The way Dwayne Smith put it, he says he kissed his knees, you know. But both Dwayne and Steve said that it looked to them like I was under outside control when I got out of there, you know, like I was in a trance. But, you know, I'd say we were all entranced with the vision of this thing. Everybody commented on the grandeur and the beauty and the power that it felt. This glow that filled the clearing with this ethereal sort of strangeness. That it was a kind of light that was soft, almost barely, you know, wherever it hit anything, it sort of changed the color of the surroundings. But the thing itself, parts of it were metallic and parts of it were glowing, but it was like smooth as glass. And this throbbing sound suddenly got louder, and it started to move. And that's just as I got up to where I was looking up at about a 45-degree angle, and that startled me. And so I just jumped for cover without even thinking. It was just kind of automatic. I went into a crouch. And this thing was hovering over a pile of logging debris that the loggers had pushed up. You know, when we finished our fuel reduction strip, we would have been passing through that same area and probably throwing some of our stuff on that pile. But there was a log sticking up, and I jumped down behind that. And by then, you know, the frenzy for the crew telling me to get back in the truck had reached its peak. But I didn't need to be told. I was thinking, I gotta get the heck out of here. And so it started to kind of move in an unsteady sort of way upward. And so I just stood up with the idea that I was just gonna sprint back to the truck. And right when I stood up, I just felt this shock, this numbing kind of electrical shock sort of feeling go through my body. But it was kind of like being hit, you know, if you've ever played football and didn't see it coming, you know, where it's just a real hard physical blow. If you've been hit by a truck, it'd be like that. And it was so powerful that some guys in the crew said that it threw me through the air, you know, 15, 20 feet. But in one of the police reports that were written up, the deputy wrote that it was described as looking like a long blue flame. Others described it as a blue-green laser beam. Others compared it to an explosion, like a landmine or a grenade or something. But the violence of it, it was so powerful that it threw me through the air. And like I said yesterday, John said that my body just fell in a heap, like a sack of meat, not a bone in my body, he said. And it was so powerful that they said they were just immediately yelling, you know, he's dead. It killed him, it got him. Let's go, let's go, let's go. And so Mike, you know, took off and dang near wrecked the truck getting out of there. I've always tried to emphasize, because there was a number of comments, you know, over the years. Mike used to come and speak with me, but he kind of got offended with the idea that people thought it was a cowardly act for them to flee at that point, you know, for them to leave me to my fate. But Mike was responsible for the lives of the remaining crew. They believed I was already dead. Why should he risk everyone's life to save a dead man? So getting out of there was the right thing to do. Everybody was screaming at him to do that, and it was just sort of an instinctive thing. And these logging roads they'll push the dirt into mounds across the road so that they don't turn into arroyos or washouts when the rains come, you know, to keep erosion down. So, you know, you got to go slow over those or you'll really tear up the car. But he was just flying over them, he said, and smashed into some trees and dented up the car. And so when they finally got farther up, they you know, stopped and, you know, said they had a screaming match about what to do. And then they saw some deer hunters go by. So they immediately thought, let's go get some help. And they went to try to catch those guys, and they couldn't catch them, which took them even farther away from the site. And by then, you know, they had a little less fear and had pretty much figured, at least Kenny and Mike probably, figured that they had better see what they could do. And so I always try to emphasize that for them to go back at that point to see if they could rescue me was a pretty courageous act, you know. They could have had every excuse to just keep going, go report it, and get some help. So they headed back, and they'd already made the decision to go back before they saw the craft leave. So you got to give them credit to have that kind of courage. But they had this argument about whether it had incinerated me or disintegrated me. Kenny was saying that, you know, he was most scared about what my corpse was going to look like. It was that powerful of a blast. So they got, and they found the spot. You know, there's some dispute about finding the spot in the movie, but they, you know, when Mike took off, he was spinning the tires on the truck, so it really dug out when he took off. And so they said they went up and searched and called, and at one point, Mike fell to his knees. He broke down. He was just so overcome, you know, the guilt at leaving, you know, the impact of the whole thing. But, you know, Kenny helped him up. It's kind of funny that the roles were sort of reversed there briefly, but Mike got a grip on himself and headed back to town. They argued about what to do. And Alan did not want to go to the authorities. He's been somebody who was kind of anti-authority in his life. So he was saying, let's just get some friends with guns and go back and then if we can't find them, then we can report it. But Mike and Kenny and some of the others agreed, if we don't stay honest about this all the way through, if Travis is never found, how's that going to look? And so, you know, we need help. So they went into town and called the sheriff. There's one mistake in my book. I thought they went to the phone booth where I went when I came back, but I wasn't there, so I didn't know. It was actually not much of a phone booth. It was more of an outdoor phone that they found. But anyway, Kenny, not Mike, is the one who called it in. The local deputy came down, and right off the bat, the deputy and then the sheriff, when the others arrived, could tell that something really terrible had happened. You know, these guys were really shook up. Some of them were still crying, including Steve. And I get a lot of flack from Steve because he just hates the fact that it came out that he had been crying. You know, I wasn't there. I didn't see. I'm just going by what the sheriff and the other crew members said. There's no shame in crying, but for Steve, apparently he thinks it's a terrible thing, and he's trying to deny that he was ever crying. But I cried. Everybody cried. Mike cried. Mike's, you know, was the oldest one on the crew, and he, you know, doesn't have any problem with admitting that he was overcome, and it's just not a measure of how tough you are, but a measure of how incredible the experience was. So the sheriff and the deputy immediately, ears perked up when the men said, well, he might be dead. You know, they were thinking he might be dead because of this blast of energy that hit me. So they met with the sheriff and his men at this abandoned gas station. Of course, it wasn't abandoned at the time. It was a business that was just closed for the night. But there was some guy that came on the internet trying to become famous and claimed that the crew met with the sheriff at something called the Red Robin Diner, which was a restaurant chain that wasn't invented for another 20 years after this incident happened. But the sheriff and his men said, well, we're going to go out there tonight. Now, in the movie, oh, well, we're not going to go out tonight, we'll go out in the morning. But they really did go back that night. And in fact, they got half the crew to go with them. So they went back out there, and the undersheriff, you know, said he was an expert tracker. And they looked and searched. And then the next morning, they got a much wider search. There's a sort of a thing in rural areas where the search parties are kind of a standby sort of emergency team composed of volunteers, search and rescue team, of course all the deputies and reserve officers and even the Forest Service are involved in the search. And so the search intensified as time went on, but John tells the story of when he went out to help with the search, they put an officer with each of the crewmen, and the officer would push at him, come on, just fess up, tell us what really happened, and we can just all go home. You know, if Alan killed him and you didn't, you know, if you cover for him, then you're going to be just as guilty as he is. So tell us who did this, you know, what really happened. Even my own brother, one of them, Don, threatened the men, said, if you've done something to Travis, I'm going to stomp a mud hole in the middle. And there was quite a confrontation between Dwayne Smith and my older brother, Don. And they knew without anybody saying anything that Dwayne would certainly extract severe punishment if they had done anything to me. But since Dwayne himself had seen one, he was more believing than Don was. And as the search went on, the pressure about the murder accusation grew. My brother Don was tearing apart the piles that we'd make, looking for my body. They were looking for blood. They were looking for any of those kinds of signs. They eventually brought in the tracking dogs from the local prison, and they were unable to find any trail other than where I got out of that truck up to the middle of the clearing where my body fell. And so as time went on, more and more pressure, and the men were just adamant. There was one confrontation where this Forest Service searcher come up and grabbed Dwayne Smith by the shirt front and jerked him up and said, where'd you hide the body? And so the men started saying, look, we'll take any test you want. Give us sodium pentothal, truth serum, lie detector, whatever. And so the sheriff heard about this and said, okay, we'll take you up on that. And so they brought in the state police lie detector expert, the top polygraph man in the state of Arizona, who had been a state police officer before becoming and an interrogation specialist, before becoming the polygraph man for the state. And the sheriff's department had used him on previous occasions with good results. In other words, finding out who was lying and who was telling the truth. So when the men went to test, there was quite a confrontation between the men and the polygraph examiner because they didn't trust him. Alan Dallas's mom had planted the idea that they might just rig these tests to make the men look guilty because they just wanted to explain this away because there was such pressure from the community as wishing this had never happened. So they got into a big argument, and the sheriff calmed everybody down and gave them this personal guarantee that he would make sure that they were fair. But you know, the nervousness and fear that Steve had been generating, I mean, he almost didn't show up for the polygraph test. He tried to slip out the back way, and they caught him, and his mom put him in the car and took him up there. But there was a tremendous amount of pressure in the community. I mean, when they came to the courthouse to take the polygraph test, a big flock of reporters and cameras flashing and people calling out, you know, questions, of course, accusing type questions. So the men knew that if anything went wrong with these tests, they weren't leaving that courthouse because the courthouse was also the jailhouse. And so when they passed, the polygraph examiner talks about how stunned the sheriff and his men were. They were pretty sure that they had a murder on their hands. But in spite of the fact that the sheriff himself had seen a UFO at close range years prior to this, but he was always in a really difficult position because the main founding fathers, town fathers, the influential figures in the county were the kind of people, cattlemen type, you know, real redneck types that just thought this kind of stuff was so absurd. So he had an image that he was trying to protect, you know, playing the part of a skeptic. And over the years, I've been contacted by a number of his friends and relatives who said that privately he was much more believing than he ever let on in public. Except for one time, he was interviewed at the same time I was for the Australian version of 60 Minutes. He was a little freer with his comments there. But that last interview, the Travis video that I've been offering here, he was also, that was the last interview he ever did before he passed away. He was also more, admitting that, what he saw was men who had been through a very traumatic experience. So, they crisscrossed the area, over 50 men on horseback, on four-wheel drive vehicles, airplanes, helicopters. My brother Dwayne rode in a helicopter during the search too, and they never uncovered anything. And like I said, the tracking dogs never found anything. But once they passed those tests, it was a whole different sort of tone. The local people were eager to explain it away any way they could. And so that began a 40-year onslaught of every sort of, if any explanation that you can possibly imagine that would explain it away has been offered, even though it didn't fit the facts in the slightest. And it was just fear-driven mostly. That's my first memory. After being hit by that energy, blurry, indistinct, couldn't focus. I actually had double vision. I was in a tremendous amount of pain. And something was definitely very seriously wrong inside. To even move increased the pain. Most of it was in my head and chest area, but it was everywhere. And I didn't know where I was. It was hot. There was something lying across my chest. And then I remembered being in the woods and seeing that object and turning to run. And I thought, well, maybe I'd, run into a tree or hit my head on a limb or something and been hurt, and the crew had taken me to the hospital. So I thought I was in the hospital. I thought I could see the doctors, with surgical masks and hat, with a little gap in between where there was this dark area. But then when I could finally focus my eyes, I could see these creatures staring over me. And I just flipped out, and I, trying to raise my arm, it took a huge effort just to move my arm. And I was trying to hit him away from me. It was close enough to where I could make contact, but it was more of a push than a blow because I was so weak. But at this, almost simultaneously, I was rolling away from it, and the thing they had on my chest fell on the floor. There's like a glow coming from it, but I was mainly just focused on their eyes. And they actually were coming towards me, They were coming around the table and they were coming towards me, but mainly they just had this riveting stare. And this stare just was so agonizing for some reason. For a long time I thought that it had to do with just the incredible strangeness of seeing a sentient creature that was non-human looking at me, but it was more than that. It gave me a feeling, a sort of a real uncomfortable feeling in my head. It felt in my mind. It felt invasive, intrusive, this squirmy, awful feeling that sort of a probing, sort of a discomfort. So later on, I had an EEG, a brainwave scan done, and it supports the idea that what was happening right there is that they were trying to reassert control over me, that this was unexpected, that somehow I regained consciousness, and this control that they would normally have telepathically just wasn't working. So kids, the school kids from Zimbabwe, way back in years prior. John Mack had gone down and investigated this case where there was like 60 school kids at recess. This craft came down in broad daylight, no adults around because they're all in this big faculty meeting, and all these kids see these three beings get out, come and speak to them telepathically through this stare. And so I was anxious to ask them what that felt like. You know, one of the girls, now grown up, was from UK, one from Canada, and one from Australia. But they all told me the same thing, that it was not uncomfortable. It didn't give you any kind of a bad feeling in there. So it made me think that possibly they were trying to combine forces to gain control of me. Because even in this weakened condition, I was a serious threat to them physically. With telepathic control, it doesn't matter how big I am compared to them. But under that circumstance, they not only needed to get me under control for their own safety, but also, as it turns out, I think, for my own good. And I had a medical doctor come up to me after one of my talks here in the last year or so, and he said, you know, the largest opening in the skull, on the front side of the skull, would be the eyes. So although the eye looking at you isn't necessarily a part of the hypnotic projection, if there is some sort of energy emanating from that brain, they would look at you to focus that energy, you know. Who knows, you know, there might be some way in which the eye is involved in projecting this communication ability they have. I never heard them make any sound to each other. I could hear the sounds of movement and things fell, and I backed away from them, and there was a shelf, a sort of a workbench behind me, and I just looked real quick to see what I bumped against, and there was a bunch of instruments laid out there. I didn't have time to study them because they were coming around, and I just grabbed the biggest thing I could find and started flailing. You know, they weren't close enough to hit, but I was just making threatening motions and screaming like a maniac. And, you know, I was terrified because I felt like I could hardly move. I felt weak. I needed to defend myself. I needed to flee, but I could hardly move. Plus this feeling that I was, you know, dying inside, you know, you know, like I might just fall down any minute, you know, like a, plus, above all, the feeling of suffocation. I couldn't get enough air. In one of the early interviews, I had said that I had been breathing heavily. Well, our famous UFO skeptic told the world that I had said I had been bleeding heavily, and made this deal out of the fact that there was no blood on my clothing, blah, 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 blah. And you can hear on the tape I said I was breathing heavily. But the feeling of suffocation generates a feeling of panic like nothing else. And I compare it to waterboarding because even though the enemy is perfectly aware of this technique, that it's not going to kill you, people go through it all the time, they even practice it, do it in training, it still works. It works because, again, the feeling of suffocation generates panic like nothing else, you know. So a lot of people, you know, think that my fear was not warranted by the situation. It certainly was off the scale in my view. I was planning to fight my way past them because I could see that the only opening from this cramped little room that we were in was past them. So I'm planning this move, and I don't know whether they just figured it out or somehow sensed that I was going to do that, but they just abruptly turned and went out without saying anything to each other. I didn't see any signal that maybe it was telepathic. But they went out and they went down this passageway to the right. So immediately I saw my opportunity to escape and went to the door and went in the other direction. And it was so dimly lit and so suffocatingly short on air that I was torn in my panic. You know, I was running but afraid to run because I didn't know whether they were following me, because it curved so tightly I couldn't see very far behind me, and I couldn't see very far ahead to see if I was running into something worse or being intercepted by others. So, claustrophobia, big time. Just in this irrational panic state, all I could think of is escape, get out of here somehow. So when I came to a doorway, you know, the first doorway, I was just in such a panic, I shot past it. But the next one, I stopped, looked in, and there was some rectangular shapes on the walls. It was a round room. But these doorways, or shapes that I took to be doorways, were, you know, a vertical rectangle. I thought if I could open one of those, maybe I could escape. In the back of my mind, thinking this craft is in the woods, 15 feet above the ground, I just dropped to the ground. When I entered the room, it darkened, but the only way, there wasn't any way to open the door. You know, I mean, I didn't see a doorknob or a button there. So the only buttons or controls were on this chair in the middle of the room. And I pieced together this layout later, so it's apparent from this that, you know, there's no way any of those doorways would have led to the outside. That was not an escape route, but I was not thinking clearly at all. I was just blind panic, just totally out of my mind with fear. So I fiddled with these controls, buttons, well, sort of like buttons. It was, I'd push, and nothing happened for the most part. Didn't open the doors. There was a little movement on this screen, but they weren't recognizable numbers or letters or characters or anything like that. It didn't look like a foreign language. It was just straight lines and angles with little segments on them. But most of them didn't seem to do anything except this lever on the left-hand side, and left-handedness, that just occurred to me. Okay, on the left-hand arm of this chair was a lever that when I moved it moved this star pattern. This star pattern was most visible when you were near the chair and almost invisible completely from the doorway or next to the doorway I came in, or the other doors, you know, that wouldn't open. You know, I went and looked to see if there was a crack, if I could see light through there or some other way to open it. And I saw nothing, no way to manipulate it. I was thinking of, once I moved that lever, all these points of light moved in a way that was kind of disorienting because they were kind of like my visual cues to upright. I was already weak and sort of unsteady on my feet, and then when that moved, it was, whoa, you know, I better not do that. And it actually occurred to me, what if this is a control for this vehicle? It may have been just some kind of planetarium-like thing viewing, but more recently I thought that maybe this whole thing wasn't really intended, at least the ability to view the surroundings had nothing to do with navigation, at least long-distance navigation, more to do with close quarter maneuvering, like trying to put it inside of a mothership or a hangar or something like that. But I was thinking of pushing the buttons again, and then something caught my attention from the door. A change in the light, the sound or something, and here was this guy standing there. And my immediate assumption was that this was somebody from some Earth-based agency that was there to rescue me from these, quote, monsters. And so I rushed to him, and considering him the rescuer, started just babbling questions, screaming. You know, I was out of control with fear. I mean, I was totally irrational, I know, but when he didn't answer me, I thought at that point that it was because he was wearing this helmet. Maybe he couldn't hear with it on, or couldn't be heard clearly with it on, but he wanted me to go with him. There's a familiar being who seems to be unafraid, and he's taking me out of here. I'm ready. I'm up for that. Let's go. So he took me out through what I think was probably an airlock, because it was a little short section of passageway that, when it opened on the other side, it was much brighter light outside and cooler and much easier to breathe. It was almost painful, the brightness of the light outside. It was coming from a curving ceiling that curved down to form one of the walls. And I was weak and unsteady on my feet, very concerned about where I was being taken. So I was mainly just rattling at this guy, and he was sort of helping me along. I was unsteady on my feet, but he had me by the arm. And I did glance around enough to see that there were other disc-shaped vehicles in there, but they were more rounded and shinier than the one we came out of. He took me across to this vertical wall opposite the curving wall, and through some doors, down the hallway, into a room, and he left me with some other people who were dressed like him, except for one thing: they were not wearing helmets. So I thought, well, you know, what's happening here? I wanted to know. It's not clear thinking, but you know, I felt safer. These are human-looking beings. What's going on here? You know, just babbling questions. And without the helmets, they still weren't answering. So as they took me over and were trying to lay me down on this table, I started fighting and demanding, screaming, wanting to know what they were doing with me. And I got no response. I know they could hear me, because when I screamed really loud, there was a sort of a wince about the volume, but it had a sort of a tolerant expression. It wasn't hostile, but in hindsight, you know, people ask me, well, why wouldn't they talk to me? And, you know, in the case of the first three beings, you know, perhaps they don't have verbal communication. Maybe they're totally telepathic. I'm not certain of that. But in the case of these human-looking beings, maybe they weren't answering me simply because it wasn't going to help. I was so out of my mind with fear that nothing they said would have had much to do. They seemed to be in a hurry. There was an urgency. And now, after, you know, having decades to think about it, I think what they were urgent about was that I was mortally wounded, that there was things that needed to be done now that I was only delaying. No time for conversation, no time to waste. So one of these human-looking beings produced a mask that they put over my face. It was kind of, it looked like an oxygen mask, except it didn't have a hose hooked to it. But as soon as it went on my face, you know, that claustrophobic thing comes back, and I'm struggling to breathe, and I jerked my arm away. They were so much stronger than me, and there was three of them, and they overpowered me. But I got my finger under the edge of it and tried to pull it away, but before I could, I was out. It didn't hurt. It was just a loss of consciousness. So my next memory at that point was waking up. I could feel cold air coming into my clothes. It wasn't like I'd been there a long time. I could still feel that the warmth that was next to my skin was being rapidly replaced by this cold air surrounding me. And my head was down on my arm, but there was a light above me. So I looked to see where the light was coming from. But just as I started to look up, it went off. So I didn't see whether it was a light being turned off or if it was like a hatch or some opening closing. But once that light went off, it was just this smooth, shiny surface there, reflecting the surroundings, the road and the trees and the roadside. And then it just shot up into the sky. And it didn't make a sound like the one in the woods. There was no vibration or alternating frequencies or any of that. It moved so fast that you would think it would like break the sound barrier or something, you know, do a sonic boom. It sort of stirred the air a little bit. I could feel a little bit of warmth wash over my face, and it moved the limbs on the tree on the far side of the road. And then it was just gone from sight really rapidly. Partly because of how fast it moved and partly because it was not lit at that point. I looked around, recognized these surroundings, and in spite of the fact that I'm in the woods in the middle of the night, it was not frightening. There was a feeling of relief. My freshest memory was the feeling that I just experienced, the terror of what I'd been through and all that. But by comparison, the woods were a familiar thing for me. You know, many times we'd worked late. I've been in the woods at night. So I looked around and I recognized the lights of the town of Heber down below. And so I just started running in that direction. And when I got down into town, I crossed the first bridge and there was a building with lights on and there was steam or smoke coming out of the chimney. So I went over there and pounded on that, and nobody answered. Maybe nobody was in there, but then on the other hand, somebody screaming like a maniac and yelling in the middle of the night might be a little too frightening. You might not want to come and see who's trying to get in. So I ran on down farther across the second bridge, and I came to a row of telephone booths. There was a service station there at the time. It's now become a restaurant, been replaced by a restaurant in the same building. But I went into the first phone booth and picked it up. It was out of order. In those days, you could pick up the receiver and just dial the operator. You know, you get a dial tone and make a collect call. But it was out of order. It didn't work. So I was, you know, on the verge of collapse, and I went into the middle booth, and it worked. I made a collect call to the closest family member, which was my brother-in-law, Grant. And Grant thought this was another crank call. The family had been harassed. All the reporters, people calling up, making ridiculous jokes, thinking this was a big, funny, ha-ha. And you know, you gotta go with some of the humor. I'll tell you about that later. Why not? You can't cry. That's not gonna help. But he goes, I think you got the wrong number. And he starts to hang up. I scream, no, it's me. And somehow, you know, the urgency in my voice, he could tell this was for real. And so I told him where I was and told him that they brought me back. And he knew what I was talking about because he said, okay, I'll get your brother and come get you. I thought, my brother, he doesn't even live here, he's in Phoenix. You see, I thought this was still the same night. But after I hung up, I collapsed there in that phone booth. And, you know, it seemed like almost immediately the lights of this truck are shining into the phone booth, so I must have been unconscious or something because my brother opened the phone booth door and lifted me out of there. And put me in the truck. And I was trying to tell him what happened, you know, and I just kept breaking down. I couldn't get it out. And then, you know, he said something about how upset my mother had been over those days. And I said, days, you know. And he could tell I thought this was the same night. He says, Travis, you've been gone for 5 days. Feel your face. I felt that I had a 5-day growth of beard. And then I looked at my watch, and it had a date thing on it. The date had changed, and I just sort of couldn't handle it anymore at that point. I just went catatonic. But I knew I was safe with them, and they drove me back to Snowflake, and that's 30 miles farther to the east, and had an extremely intense reunion with my mother. She had, in a way, given me up for dead. My brother's main concern at that point was there something medically wrong? You know, I didn't feel well. Certainly a lot better when I regained consciousness on the craft. But he knew that was going to be impossible there because, you know, it was a madhouse. There were reporters from other countries there already, all kinds of sightseers and all kinds of ominous phone calls too. The family received a call from this one lady who said she was working as a nurse in a hospital where this old couple had had a close encounter with a UFO, and they were traumatized seriously. And she said when she came back on shift, they were gone. Their records were not there, and the rest of the staff was saying, no, that didn't happen, they weren't here. So she was saying, just be careful who gets a hold of him. And then this other guy called and said, I shouldn't be doing this, you know, I'm retired CIA, but just be careful of who gets a hold of him, should he ever be found. So my brother's main concern was get me away from this craziness that was going on there, all the crank calls. And so he took me to Phoenix. He had been given the card of a UFO organization. Now in the movie, there's this outfit called AFAR, which is a fictitious group, but it was a flaky group that, as it turned out, who had promised prompt medical treatment. We were sent to a guy who was actually a fake. He was pretending to be a doctor, and apparently didn't really have a medical degree of any kind. When the reporters pressed on his credentials, turned out he'd been a medic in the Marine Corps, he said, and then later he goes, no, that's Navy. So he changed his story on that. But the guy was a total fraud. All he had was a degree from a 2-year correspondence school that, you know, had only been in existence that long. So it was basically a diploma mill. But this guy was so unprofessional, my brother said, we're getting out of here. But they had already announced to the media that they had the investigation of the case and were getting all this attention. And so the minute we were not having anything more to do with them, they started attacking and making all kinds of claims that I've described. But it wasn't too long before the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization figured out where I was. My brother had put out the story that I was in a Tucson hospital just to get the reporters off of the trail, but they figured it out, called my brother. The only reason they were able to get past his defenses was that they were promising medical care. They had real MDs in their Phoenix membership who agreed to come to the house, do an examination, which they did, and then immediately arranged these other tests that I told you about. Blood tests, urinalysis. The first avoided specimen, my brother had the presence of mind to save that, even though, you know, I certainly needed to go before the doctor appointment the next morning. So we had these tests, one after another, upper body x-rays, looking for any sort of physical trauma, explain the pain in my head, EKG, you know, check the heart, and EEG, which was a brainwave scan. And this was at world-famous Barrows Neurological Institute. It's where Muhammad Ali went to train, for his treatment. He wound up donating huge amounts of money to the hospital for a new wing, and he moved to Phoenix in order to be near there. But I was put in there by Dr. Kendall under an assumed name, so the technician did not know who I was. He had no reason to connect me to the incident or anything. So he was just looking for signs of brain injury. And he wrote in his report about, let me see if I can remember the wording, an alternating bisynchronous wave traveling from front to back, which was anomalous enough that he mentioned it in the report. So I recently had a new EEG. I haven't seen the results of that yet. And we're going to take these and the original report to a neuroscientist and see how this compares to the results you would get from someone who had been electrocuted or hit by lightning, something like that. So there's, follow-up research, and also to see, if this anomalous pattern is still there or has anything to do with other phenomena involved. So I went through a whole battery of psychiatric tests because, people were trying to explain it away, The psychiatrists that became involved, there was 3 or 4 of them, went to the news media the next day and said, this guy's not lying, he's been through a trauma. But in their world, there's no such thing as UFOs, so they were trying to explain it away as a transitory psychosis. And but all these medical, the psychiatric tests that other APRO psychologists and psychiatrists administered proved to be a totally normal pattern of scores. But it was, from then on, a whole litany of allegations, tests that disprove it, affidavits from experts, polygraph after polygraph. And interestingly, the man who saved my life, this is Lorenzen, head of APRO at the time. Dr. Harder performed the hypnosis. Dr. Sprinkle reviewed the psychiatric tests that other psychiatrists had administered. I met with Dr. Heineck. He made a press release the next day. Travis Walton is not hoaxing. And this was a memo that I obtained from someone who had gone through the Freedom of Information Act to get the FBI file on Philip Glass. And you can see it's from J. Edgar Hoover and to Director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Now you can see there's quite a bit of material that's blocked out here, but there's a number of memos in this file, and they had investigated him to see, if he had transmitting equipment that had been purchased or was located at his residence. A number of things going on here, but there was another memo that had like 9 lines blocked out, but ended with the statement, and not to be of assistance to his government. And that, to me, is the smoking gun concerning the intent of this memo. When the FBI turned the investigation and the evidence against Philip Glass over to the CIA, I believe they were providing them with the kind of leverage that they had somebody in their stable that they could control. Like I said, a standard CIA recruiting tactic. We can prosecute you for this, but we want your help. They didn't make him into a UFO skeptic, but they could call the shots and bankroll $10,000 bribes and plane trips to try to get someone to take them. So this whole government connection was very suspicious. This is a whole list of quotes from other memos in the FBI file. You know, Class is well known to us, deficient on all points of his argument, particularly concerning the credentials of Dr. Hynek, which could scarcely be better. This is quoting the FBI. On the other hand, Class has no such sterling reputation and has twice been under FBI investigation with the unauthorized publication of classified information. His previous communications generally have been accusatory or argumentative in nature. In other words, never mind the evidence. The Newark field office suggests the reading of the letter indicates writer is most likely not in full possession of his faculties. And this is the guy that today's skeptics and debunkers are quoting as the premier investigator of my case. The FBI knew he was a nutcase, you know, but he was a useful idiot, you know. That's what these kinds of people are done. A BU file, which is an abbreviation for FBI file, 6211-64443, in view of Class's intemperate criticisms and often irrational statements he made to support them, it was recommended that the Bureau be most circumspect in any future contacts with him. So the next one was the one I was just talking about. 9 lines of redact, whited out. They used to be black, but they make them white now to save ink, because they're blacking out so much of what they release through the Freedom of Information Act. And not to be of assistance to his government. With the excuse, in the second to the last quote, classified information published by Class could not be declassified for purposes of prosecution, which of course is not true. They prosecute people for revealing classified information all the time. They just swear all the people involved in the operation to secrecy. So basically they're not prosecuting because they're going to hold that over his head. And that's what that means down below. Dallas, the Dallas field office, where Class had lived before, is maintaining this case in RUC status. They're holding it over his head. So we have all that. And then it was discovered 15 years after the incident that the trees nearest where the craft had come down had grown very much faster than they had in the previous 85 years. Here's a tree, 85 years old. And you know, you can see by counting back 1 ring for each year to the time of the incident that the tree had doubled in diameter in 15 years. So it's now a 100-year-old tree, but because the outside ring contains much more wood fiber than the inside, it's a bigger circle, right? So the calculation was made that these trees were producing wood fiber at 36 times the rate that they had before. Now, Ben Hansen came out with this last summer, and we did some further on-site analysis and research of the tree rings and the growth. It was important to get this done because the forest fire that went through there had killed a lot of trees, and they're going to rot away if we don't check this stuff out fast. But the discovery this last summer, see, that was discovered 15 years after the incident. But this last year, nearly 40 years afterwards, it was revealed that these thickened rings were primarily on the side of the tree towards where the craft had been. If you're standing in the middle of the clearing, any of these trees that you would point to the stump, the thickened rings were the side towards the craft. Well, Ben Hansen did some further research and discovered that the pine trees, it was a Scots pine, similar to the ponderosa pine species in the vicinity of the Chernobyl nuclear accident, had exhibited increased growth there too. And that was all documented, which is, totally contrary to what you'd expect. It's kind of counterintuitive. You would think that radiation would kill things, but in the case of these pine trees, somehow this scarring or this damage causes them to thicken. And I don't know how this correlates with crop circle data, but this is ongoing research. We've got soil samples and wood samples, and some of these were collected by plant scientists Dr. Levengood has done some preliminary research, and I've seen some of the report on that. And so this is ongoing research. The EEG is ongoing research. We've got some other follow-ups in connection with the government attempts to suppress this. This is stuff I probably shouldn't talk about, but there was one. Here's something that might just be a humorous. I was looking at this map of Arizona, and it was all divided. The book was divided into one page for each of the sections that you look at here. And when I looked up this section that corresponded to where the incident happened, right here, I think it is, it was labeled Area 51. So either a sense of humor for the map makers or some sort of odd synchronicity going on there. Another coincidence is there's D.B. Sweeney on the set of Fire in the Sky, and there's my son. He came with me to talk, and people said, "Oh, you brought D.B. Sweeney with you?" I go, "No, what?" And then I did the comparison, and I could see that there's this phenomenal resemblance, same eye color and the whole thing. And of course, there's an age difference. D.B. Sweeney would have been like 8 years old when my son was born, but that was an interesting coincidence. And there was quite a number of incidents and coincidences, things that coincide with it that might have a very direct bearing on what was going on here. Dr. Robert Salas, has reported on these incidents that are a matter of record, that at the time this was happening to me, there were a number of nuclear installations across the United States that were being tampered with by UFOs. The UFO sighting would come and they would actually shut down or have an effect on these missile silos. So a lot of stuff going on with the research and the follow-up and the government meddling that was going on behind the scenes, things that are coming out, new things, even at this late date in time. And I think we're running out of time. I'd be interested in taking some questions. Can we do that now?
Oh, no, we're going to go into a Q&A after break.
Okay, well, we'll do the Q&A after break. So, the one thing I was talking about is, you got to look on the bright side of this, that friends and family came through, stood by me. They were, my rock, my salvation, because I felt very abandoned and under attack from all sides. You had to, try to see the humor in things. They come up with jokes. They found out Travis was telling the truth. Yeah. When he came back, they found a Mars bar in his pocket. Little kids on the playground singing the sing-song. Flying saucer UFO, where did Travis Walton go? And then they added, Travis ate him, now he's back. Now he has to take a spaceship. I was kind of offended when I first heard those things, but you got to roll with the punches. Some interesting coincidences. I met a lot of nice people and interesting people, and discovered a whole phenomenon worldwide that I had no clue was as huge as it is and as significant as it is. This is probably the most, what would you say, central to anybody's consideration of our place in the universe. And yet it's marginalized and mocked and considered ridiculous. And, we've got, reality TV shows and stuff that are 20 feet tall in people's minds. And here this grandest of all mysteries is, being ignored to a very large extent. But it's changing over time. Things have grown. studies, the surveys that were done back at the time this happened, you know, revealed that, you know, there was a considerable amount of people who believed they'd seen something and that sort of thing, but those numbers have increased dramatically. And the emails and contact I've had from all over the globe is coming from some really obscure places where, you know, they've heard of this, they've heard of my experience, they want to know more about it. You know, places like Tanzania, Moldova, and little island nations, and in you know, the obscurity of the place and the frequency of the contact. So, and even locally, you know, what used to be is sort of a feeling of isolation and being set apart. You know, you'd be out in public and giving you sidelong glances, you know, they're talking about you, but they're not coming over and greeting you. But in the last few years, that's changed. You know, people will see me downtown and say, hey, my cousin is coming in town, he really wants to meet you, can you do that? And, you know, they see me and come up and shake my hand and say, I always supported you. And I'm saying, well, not that I noticed, but thank you. And, you know, people want to take a picture and that kind of positive content almost every time I go out now. And that's a huge switch locally. But generally, you know, worldwide, there's an awareness that extends, you know, I've met and been contacted by and communicated with certain government figures, celebrity type people, and their interest and belief in their sharing similar experiences is far more extensive than I ever would have imagined. So people ask me, why are you even talking about this, you know? And at first, I just wanted to run away from it. I wouldn't talk to the media. And you know, I told you how that wasn't working. But over time, I gradually come to realize that along with the burden that came with this, there's a responsibility and an opportunity to make some good come of it. Because, you know, as a spokesman for this phenomenon, it's urgent that people realize that we're not alone, and the sooner we're ready for that, the sooner, quote unquote, disclosure is going to occur. I had the theory that disclosure, voluntary, is not going to come from petitions to the government. Gee, this is really a popular desire with the people, let's give it to them. I don't think the people who are hiding this information care what we want, but it might also be more than just, well, we're not going to come forward and say, gee, we've been lying to you for decades, but now we're going to tell you the truth. Trust us from here on, but okay, here's the whole story. You know, what politician wants to put themselves in that position? But in their defense, you know, it might be that they realize that if they were to just come out there and plop this out in front of the world today, that it would be incredibly destructive. That, you know, the people in this room, they'd take it in stride. But, you know, most of the people that are giving me flack and, you know, pushback that many of you have experienced would be extremely disruptive. Many people would not go to work tomorrow. It would certainly shake the foundations of political allegiances, religious organizations, and the financial basis of the world economy centers on oil. If the population of Earth realized that there was non-oil sources of energy, are they going to sit still and keep paying $40 a barrel or whatever it is? The whole thing could come crashing down if it was acknowledged at this point. Eventually, inevitably, this has to happen. It's going to happen. And it's my contention, spending 40 years thinking about this, that the aliens themselves are aware of how destructive it would be to be that open about it. You know, the skeptics said if there was anything to this, they would land on the White House lawn, you know, and come down on the Super Bowl and say, here we are, people. No, that's not going to happen. Not just because they might be fired upon, but because they are aware of what would happen to us as a consequence. I don't think they're being clumsy or stupid or slipping up when they're seen. On the contrary, I believe that those who see these things are being shown. This is, you know, some people perceive that this is a display to me. And I always, when I first heard that, thought, you're going to kind of be egotistical about that, you know. But, you know, I really do think that there's no accident to that. With their technology, they know where everybody is. You know, if the NSA knows where all these cell phones are, certainly the aliens can do so. And so I think the amount of exposure, the amount of sightings that we have is deliberate, measured, and always short of the kind of undeniability that would cause that kind of disruption. So it kind of corresponds to science fiction idea of a non-interference directive, a prime directive, that open contact with less developed societies would be harmful to them. And so, are we supposed to just sit quiet and leave it as this unsolved mystery forever? Well, no. That's why I'm out here talking about this. The hope of doing some good is to make us ready, to accustom, it'll be a trickle-up effect from the grassroots level, that people are not going to be shocked or upset. They're going to take it in stride. The more that people can gradually, and it's got to be gradual, become aware that this is a reality, this really does happen, that these beings really are there. I mean, look at the astronomy, just look at the mathematics involved, the number of stars, the number of planets. You know, I was commenting about how the Drake equation, when they first came up with that, they were plugging numbers in there that were far too conservative on, you know, how many stars might have a planet going around them. Well, now, you know, NASA said last year, it's virtual certainty that every star has about a dozen planets. And even with our technology now, we're able to identify where the likely life-supporting planets are. So the skeptic contention that, oh, they would never be able to find us even if there was somebody out there, is, you know, a foolish assumption, because with our comparatively primitive technology, we can see where possibly they are. So, you know, if they're a million years ahead of us, they've known all about us for a very long time. And the evil alien scenario I don't favor, because if they wanted this planet, they could have it in a heartbeat, because there'd be no way to fight it off. I mean, with their level of technology, resistance would be, we'd never know what hit us. So obviously this little peekaboo sort of exposure that we get, where we see the beings, we see the craft, these experiences happen, never provable enough to cause that kind of absolute disruption. But still, you know, my point was that if they really had some sinister plan, they could do everything they're doing here and remain completely undetected. There would be no ufology, there'd be no sightings, and boom, it would just pop on us. But like I say, you know, they've been around for a long time, millions of years, and the fact that it hasn't happened yet, and the fact that they themselves survived that long, possessing that kind of power, is evidence that along with that technological development, there was a comparative development morally and ethically. So I am somebody who is not in agreement with the evil alien invading monsters theory of other life from other worlds. So I'm going to wrap it up, and after the break, we'll talk.
What can I say? Put your hands together for Travis Walton. Brilliant. Wow. Standing ovation. Well done. Now, believe it or not, he went 20 minutes over which is sacrilegious, but a good interviewer knows when to let somebody talk. And so you've sat an extra 20, I let it run because that was brilliant. So now take a 20 minutes, we'll have the second day speakers for Q&A, and then we'll go into the final Q&A photographs. So 20 minutes, I hope you enjoyed that, I certainly did.